that as for our protection. They can do whatever they want to us as long as they give us this get-out clause, this remedy, which is the person. Now the remedy is there, and it's a very easy remedy, but it's hidden in plain sight, and it's in the language that they use. The language that they use is the most deceptive thing. When you're in court, the words that they use are defined so specifically for a reason. So you could be standing in court and what you think you hear is English, but the language you're hearing is actually called legalese. So you have a completely different comprehension to what's actually going on.
Where are we going with this? Like, I mean, is this to say that people, there has to be laws and regulations to rule? Man is totally imperfect, sort of way, and what I'm getting from this is, we should all be able to do what we want, and if someone tries to correct us, we can say, well, I'm not this, and I'm not that.
Well, I think that we should be able to do whatever we want as long as you don't harm another human being. Like, that's where the line is. That's the line right there. If you harm another human being, you have no rights. You've lost your rights as soon as you infringe on another's rights. So yeah, you are free to do whatever you want. You're free to travel without a license, untaxed. You're free to experiment in this, world that we're in, untaxed, unhindered, free. Until you harm another sentient being, that's when law comes into play.
And so, who writes the law?
Well, define a crime. I define a crime as someone
harm or loss, basically. Cause anyone harm or loss or be fraudulent in your contracts. That's about it at common law level, and that's what we.
At that stage, then once you get into that, then you start saying, well, who writes the law, and how do we agree on the law?
That's actually unwritten stuff.
It's unwritten law. It's positive law. It's unwritten, like it's
natural law.
Natural law.
It's the law that's prevalent in a family household.
That's all great if you're decent and good. Sort of way you have a conscience and morals. And
that's it. Yeah.
That's presumed.
It starts from when you're young, like your parents will try to teach you morals and blah blah blah. But sometimes they're just let go. It's where they grow up. It's usually if people grow up in poverty and all, they're left. The society just lets down people. But I believe it can be done, but it'd be an extremely slow process of re-educating people and trying you can't force anything on people. Once you try to force something on someone, they just won't bother doing it. So people kind of have to be just re-educated and just realise who they are. We're all the same. I think when people realise that we're all the same, we're not here to harm each other. I think this will have a grasp on someone. But you can't get out of the system. We're born free, but once we sign the birth certificate, we're born into commercial slavery.
And at the end of the day, every man or woman can only speak for themselves. Do you think that you're a decent guy? Do you think that you should be able to enjoy all your freedoms, and that if you were given the responsibility to do that, do you think you'd cause harm to someone? That's what it comes down to. You can worry about everybody else in the world, but you're only responsible for your world and what's going on in your life. And like the quote from Gandhi, you have to be the change that you want to see in the world. You don't worry about what other people potentially are going to do. You have to be the example for those people as well,
As the world turns and as day-to-day life goes on, how is all these people getting put in prison and punished and all this stuff, and it just goes unsaid and unnoticed?
They consent to it. You have to consent. You have to consent to go to prison if you're getting charged under a statute. I've watched it in the courts myself. You have to.
So you say no, I don't consent to go to prison.
The judge actually asks you, do I have your consent to put you to incarcerate you? We don't know this yet. Once you got to understand what's going on in the courtroom from the legalese point of view and from the solicitor's point of view. And once you realise that, you realise it's an absolute fraud if they went into do with statutes and acts and all that. All they're doing is just trying to extract revenue from you. That's about it. Because you'll notice that every statute or act, they have a charge in them, they have fines, and that's operating commercially. When you're operating commercially, you're basically in contract law as well. And in contract law, when you're dealing with the courts, there has to be offer, consideration and acceptance. Both parties have to put up an offer, and the judge offers you something, you can offer him back, but you have to do it honourably and never dishonour a contract as well.
And you have seen any cases of let's say people are making their business to know people that are going to be going to court, going to be charged for certain things that you can say, okay, this is what you say at school to go in and see if what you're talking about actually works. or if it's just an idea.
Well, the thing is with this information, I found that you cannot say to somebody like, you know, just do this or just do that. It's a concept that you need to adjust to. We're talking about getting back to a time when we just had law, not legislation. Like we had Brehon law up until the 17th century. So we're only with this system in full force for about 300 years. How much of a shift would it need to go back to how we were? You know, all of this information, and there's a lot of it. It's a very deep rabbit hole, but it can be grasped very easily with just a little shift. You know what I mean? A little shift of consciousness.
I don't disagree with what I'm saying. Is do you know of anybody, or have you got any cases where you have said to someone, okay, you're going to court, I'll sit with you, or this person knows the story, he'll sit with you, this is what he said. Have you done that? Is there any cases where you can say...
my brother has been in court for, well, he's finished now, but he was in court about 6 times, and he was using all this information. And well, we have a video of it, do we? The last one.
We'll show you later what he actually went.
But basically, I'll give him an overview of it. Actually, he was out driving one night, or travelling, and he went up a wrong way street by accident. He was bringing his friends to a party, and of course the guards caught him going up the wrong one-way street. And a bank guard, I think, came up to the window of the car and goes, what was it? Goes, license registration, where you going? What's going on? And he goes, I'll gladly give you that information if you prove to me that you've any authority over me as a human being. And the minute that happened, all hell broke loose. He was dragged out onto the ground. 5 guard cars showed up, and he was in court the next morning. He completely didn't give his name. But he called himself. Yeah, they called him Mr. X. And he didn't give his name, doesn't give any details, and he was brought to court the next morning. And he went to the court, and he just sat there. And basically just, the judge was asking all these questions, like, you shall my man? And he goes, yeah, if you proof of claim and all, he was asking the judge. Certain techniques you can do.
To avoid going into contracts. But first of all, you have to see when they're trying to trick you into contracts, you know? So, move on to the law.
We'll continue on and we'll talk about that in a while. Where is it?